All right, here we are today with my friend Tate Mootes. How long we known each other, Tate?
Man, I don't know. Probably 15, 20
I
years.
think the first time I think we'd met informally, and the first time I formally met you was with a mutual friend of ours, Dave Neth. I think we were down in Vegas at a three-gun match.
Yep.
I think it was like the Surefire World three-gun match or something. I think the three of us went down and shot that, and I'm sure you did really well, and I was probably not as good as you, but it was a good time. But we got to meet. I remember we were sitting outside. We were like tailgating or something, and you're playing the guitar, or Dave was playing the guitar.
I wasn't playing the guitar. Dave was playing the guitar. I just sing along and make horrible sounds.
But you've had quite the career in shooting sports, right?
Yeah.
What got you started in shooting sports?
My dad. I grew up. My dad was already a competition shooter when I was a young guy, and he shot a lot of IPSC matches and three-gun matches, and so I started out shooting a single-stack 1911 with a break on the front and iron sights because that was the heat back then.
1911 with iron sights, huh?
Yeah.
I think I forgot how to do that now, and it's only been not even that long ago.
Well, I can't see the sights anymore, so.
Yeah, I've been shooting a dot now for, I think, 3 to 4 years maybe. Just not going back and forth. I kind of played with it before, but now I'm dedicated red dot electronic sights.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I never had a dot on any of my guns, carbine or pistol, until 2 years ago after I retired from federal service, and I haven't looked back. I was the holdout. I didn't want the dot when I was an agent, and the fellas started shooting a heck of a lot better, and even mediocre shooters started shooting a heck of a lot better on their quals and stuff, and so I knew there was something to it, but I was a typical egotistical guy, and I figured I can still beat all these guys with iron sights, and that's where I stayed until I moved. And most of the people that we were training after I retired, they're shooting dots. Yeah. And there's it's a game changer because you change your focus from the front sight to whatever is shooting at you or whatever the threat is.
Yeah, being target focused, right? Instead of focused on your front sight. A friend of mine that told me a story about that, being involved in a shooting, and he says the guy was about 15 yards away, and he saw the guy present a revolver, and he brought the gun up, and he did what he was trained to do. He brought his vision off the target back to the front sight, and he goes, I lost the target. He goes, my front sight covered up my whole target at 15 yards.
Yep.
So he's a big proponent of red dot sights because of that target focused shooting. But they've been around for a long time, right? You and I, being a little bit older, we remember the names like Jerry Barnhart, right? And you look back at Jerry Barnhart, who was a world champion, USPSA or IPSC shooter back in the day, and he was winning championships with the big red dot sight on his gun. And that's been back in like the 80s, I believe.
That's right.
And so that's what's amazing. And a lot of people for a long time would never admit. They used to argue with me when I would say, competition shooters are what really push the tactical side. And people would argue that because that big division that we used to have between competition shooters and tactical shooters, people didn't want to admit that the competition shooters were on the leading edge. And once they figured things out, the tactical guys, the law enforcement military guys, would slowly, and I mean slowly, like 10 years behind, start to adopt a lot of those things.
Absolutely. I'm a huge believer in competition shooting for law enforcement guys and military guys. I just don't see how anything where you are under some sort of stress, no matter what it is, whether it's a time clock or if you're shooting against another shooter on the same type of course of fire, whatever that stress is, it is something stressing you out, and you're shooting a course of fire that's not your normal, go to the range, do your annual or quarterly or whatever qual. You're doing something different, and you learn the mechanics. You learn how your gun feels when it's running right, and you start learning to manipulate it when it's not running right. I love competition.
Yeah, I kind of, when I talk to guys, I mentioned that as police officers, we typically, most of them are trained in qualification speed is what I call it, right?
That's
they're
right.
just, because they're trying to get their hits, they want to make sure they don't miss. But then you watch body cam footage and they don't shoot the same way that they train. So, but hey, before we get too far into this, I want to just let our audience know, you've been, tell us just real briefly about your professional background.
Yeah, so I started out, I was an engineering student, and I ran out of money at school. And one of my buddies was on the Sheriff's Department Reserve, and he goes, "Hey man, you need to try this. You'd fit right in." And so I went and joined the Sheriff's Department Reserves, and I did love it right off the bat. And so I went to work for the Sheriff's Department full time, and then I went federal instead of state and local. I went to the U.S. Border Patrol.
And where was that Sheriff's Department? What state was that in?
That was in Eddy County, New Mexico. It's the southeastern corner of New Mexico. And then I went to the Border Patrol, and I was mostly stationed in South Texas, right on the tip of the United States down south. And then after about 5.5 years, I went to the Department of Energy, and I was an agent there until I retired.
Do they watch over light bulbs, or what does the Department of Energy do?
It's pretty much watching electricity. No, it's Department of Energy agents are responsible for transporting our nuclear weapons.
All right. And is that an unusual thing in the United States? Is that transportation? I mean, I don't want to get in. I know you got to have a certain security clearance to work in that type of stuff, but
yeah, so
is that something that happens often?
Nobody can ever confirm nor deny where a nuclear weapon actually is, but in the past is okay. So I moved through the ranks in my career there, and at one time I was told that my convoy that I was responsible for was the 4th strongest nuclear power on the planet.
Wow.
And so we just move those things from one place to another because they are very old and they need maintenance.
Yeah. And a lot of times that transportation is just going from a nuclear facility to another nuclear facility, right? The DOE oversees places like Idaho National Laboratories. You got Hanford up in Washington, and there's places that are known to the public all over the country.
That's right. So it's either Department of Energy, nuclear facilities, or military installations that have nuclear weapons. So
Yeah.
it's one of those.
Yeah, so I got to do that for a short time. Wasn't the same job that you had, but it was in the security type divisions, I guess, over at the Idaho National Laboratories. But yours was a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
'Cause you
Uncle
weren't
Sam spent a lot of money helping me to be good at my job. And it's funny because you and I were out on the range today training warfighters to be better. And now that I'm retired, I absolutely love it. It pleases me. It doesn't pay very well right now, but it really pleases me to make these guys better because Uncle Sam and so many of my friends have invested so much in me, helping me to be better and come home safe and healthy. I like to return that favor.
Yeah, I think it's great that, after my 30 years law enforcement, doing SWAT and firearms, competition shooting, all that kind of stuff, I've even learned from you being out at matches and things like that, or just like today, you and I kind of during class or on breaks and stuff, you talk about your certain philosophy, or hey, this needs to be trained, or this shouldn't be trained, whatever. And so it's nice to be out here with some other military guys to be able to pass that stuff on. So it's been a pretty good class. It's been good training with you today. Tell me a little bit about your competition shooting, though. You started to talk about that. Your dad got you started in that. I know you were a big 3-gunner. There was a lot of us that were 3-gun used to be pretty big back in the early 2000s, and that's kind of when I got started. And then I did that for a while until I got tendonitis so bad that I couldn't hardly pull the trigger. So I had to kind of quit doing it for quite some time. Now I pretty much just stick to USPSA pistol shooting with an occasional 2-gun. So tell me a little bit about how you.
Yeah, so, my dad got me introduced to it when I was a little kid, and then I would reload, and as long as I reloaded our ammo, he'd let me shoot the matches. And he coached me, and there was a couple other guys his age that were his buddies that coached me. One of them was the one that talked me into going to the Border Patrol. But after I grew up a little bit, when I got into high school and stuff, of course I was a knucklehead teenager and rebelled against my dad a bit. And then I was in the workforce, and so I didn't shoot for a long time. And once I became a Border Patrol agent, so after the Sheriff's Department, I found a local USPSA club or IPSC club, and I started shooting pistol matches again. And I never shot a rifle match while I was down there, but after I changed jobs to Department of Energy, they sent me to a rifle school down in South Texas at Rifles Only. And they were telling me there that they have sniper matches and stuff like that. And so I was like, oh, I want to do that. I want to try it. And so I went and shot a match down there and instantly fell in love. And then I found a good friend that was my dad's age in Albuquerque, where I was stationed. And he got me into the local shooting club. He was a big 3-gun shooter, so he took me out and we played a little bit, and I was like, I remember this from when I was a kid. I loved this stuff and instantly was hooked. He took me to a big match in Mesa, Arizona, and I was instantly hooked. As a matter of fact, I bought one of John Paul Gangle's JP Enterprise rifles at that match and started competing from that day. And we got pretty hot and heavy into 3-gun. As a matter of fact, I shot 3-gun for about 27 years, and I was very successful for a long time, probably 15, 18 years. I was very successful, and I got to shoot on the...
Well, not to interrupt you, but all these years, and I don't even shoot 3-gun anymore, but I just now was able to afford a JP rifle and bought one about a year ago.
Well, and I'll
It's been my
tell you,
lifelong dream to have a JP
yeah,
rifle.
and I'll tell you, I shot that rifle in TAC Optics, which is a 223 or a 5.56 rifle. I shot that rifle for about 1 year, and I was at a match up in Minnesota, the DPMS Tri-Gun, and it was funny because at the time I was probably a mediocre C-class IPSC shooter, and I met Randy Luth, who owned DPMS Firearms at the time, and we hit it off and had a nice long conversation. And when I left that match, he was sponsoring me to shoot DPMS rifles, and that was my first sponsor. And then after that, I got quite a few more sponsors and became much more successful because, like I said, I was at best a mediocre C-class IPSC shooter when I started shooting 3-gun. And then I became real successful and had lots of titles and all that cool stuff. I got to shoot on Team USA for 2 different world shoots. It was a blast. I loved it. I love burning any gunpowder for the most part.
Yeah. So you were pretty successful in 3-gun, and then you were pretty successful. I remember seeing you in a magazine. You were like the king of the mile or 2 mile or something.
Yeah,
What was that about?
King of the long ball. It was so the USPSA Nationals. They had it was almost like a side match, and it was a bolt gun match. And the first time I went to the Nationals, I watched guys do that, and I was like, I could do that. And so the next year I went and I won it, and they did USPSA or whoever writes those articles, they put it in that magazine, and I was the king of the long ball. So yeah, that's pretty
I just remember going, I know that guy.
yeah, that's pretty comical. But yeah, I will tell you that in the long range game, my biggest accomplishment was I chased Terry Cross, Jim Clark Jr., Wade Studeville. I chased those guys forever. It seems like I chased them for like 3 years. Never could beat those guys. And then finally, we went down to rifles only, which was the first match that I ever shot. And I beat all of them. I won the match. And I'm sitting at Applebee's after the match, just smoked and excited. And this gigantic banana split shows up at our table. And I used to call Terry Cross Magnum PI because of that big old mustache. And it said, "Eat one of these every day, you little bleep, 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 Magnum PI." Yeah, but
Trying to get you out of shape.
yeah. And so what I really loved about it was, one, I loved the sports and the community. They're always really helpful, and they encourage you to get better and better, and they push you to get better and better. But I was also a cop at the time, so all those skills helped me to come home safe and healthy.
How do you think that the shooting sports, specifically, 3-gun, USPSA, action type sports, how do those things translate over to law enforcement, military?
Oh, they translate over 100%, because when you're in those competitions, you're trying to be accurate, you're trying to use speed, and you're manipulating, you're doing tack loads, you're doing combat loads, all under a time hack, and it just makes you better for when you're in that law enforcement situation. So that, your manipulations, they're second nature, that you don't have to think about it as much as if it's, I haven't practiced since last year when I did my qual. Crap, I forgot how to load my dang gun,
So you're saying that way you can run your gun and not have to think about it, so you can think about tactics.
So you
right?
can think about that problem in front of you, yeah.
Yeah. You see that even on basic qualification day. We're out there running the range. You got guys coming out to do their quarterly qualification, and guys are getting ready to shoot, and you see the way they're gripping that gun. They grab that gun out of the holster, they grip it, they re-grip it, and they re-grip it multiple times
Before they ever even fire a shot.
Correct, because they're just not used to handling that gun.
Yeah, and another habit that we really picked up on when I was back at DOE is guys would really get methodical about their draw, right? They would come out of the holster nice and slow, present nice and slow, press forward nice and slow, getting their grip situated. And then when it came to qual day, they did the exact same thing. They weren't drawing fast. They were going too slow and eating up lots of time. Well, that's fine when you're doing the qual speed.
Yeah.
But that's horrible when you're doing real life speed.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Or I say, whether you're involved in the shooting or involved in competition, it's all a competition. You're still trying to beat the clock, right? You're
That's
trying
right.
to go faster than the other guy.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I love shooting sports. I absolutely love them. I would still go back and shoot a pistol match. I'd still go back and shoot a PPC match, which is like bullseye for cops, and 3-gun and all of it. I love all shooting sports, and I think they all make me better at one, being a human, and two, being law enforcement. Yeah. But anytime you're out there doing that stuff, you just get better, and you're reactive to whatever's in front of you, and your manipulations are faster to get you on that problem.
So when you were at the top of your game in like the action shooting sports like 3-gun, how often were you practicing? What was your training schedule like?
It's pretty crazy. I trained pretty much every single day. If I wasn't at work training, which in most weekdays, like when we were not on a mission, we were back at our command, I would shoot ranges throughout the week there, and then I would go to our local gun club and shoot almost every day. I shot, I don't know how many rounds, but I shot a lot.
So did you dry fire often?
I didn't. I know that dry fire, I do more dry firing now than I ever did back then. But I'm just going to say I was blessed. All of my taxpayers gave me lots of ammo to shoot, and I shot lots of ammo. So unlike many, and nowadays, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine because it's so expensive. But Uncle Sam spent a lot of money on me being good at what I did.
Yeah. So were you with Border Patrol first before DOE, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So
they spent a lot of money on me as well.
When you were with Border Patrol has a reputation for having really good shooting teams and a good shooting program. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, their PPC teams are usually in the top 2 or 3, almost.
And what does PPC stand for?
Police pistol combat shooting. Yeah. It's like a silhouette with a bullseye in the middle of it, but it's really tight groups, really accurate shooting for the most part, but it's still on Tom Hack. Mm-hmm. And so the Border Patrol teams were always really good. I got to practice with them while I was an instructor at the Border Patrol Academy.
Border Patrol seems to win a lot of championships.
They do. Yeah, there's some great shooters in the Border Patrol.
And then what about DOE? Did you get a lot of training with DOE?
I did get a lot of training. I did. I got lots of training for DOE. They sent us to lots of shooting
What's that
schools.
like? So you get hired on, and what's the shooting program like?
Well, I'm not gonna go too much into detail there, but we did fire a lot of rounds, and we did work on our fundamentals. We worked a lot on tactics, and they were pretty different than what a lot of people are used to. But the one thing I'll tell you is I had managers that absolutely hated me being a competition shooter. They wanted me at work doing the job all the time, and if I took off on a Friday to go shoot a match Saturday and Sunday, they were furious with me. It cost me promotions.
Because they wanted you at work when you were taking time off?
And some people get all mad when I say that. They're like, man, you were good. You were really good. They should have been proud of you. And I was like, yeah, they should have been, but they weren't. They wanted me at work.
Yeah. It seems to be a reoccurring theme with people in this type of work, whether it's military, law enforcement. I hear that with different guys who are really into, that lifestyle competition, whether it's, it's CrossFit games, firearms, training or competition, and guys who are like at the top of their game. It seems like to a certain extent almost looked down upon for some reason.
That's right. Yeah, they're looked down upon. It in my opinion, it's a shame because, anything you can do to be more physically fit, better at those worst case scenarios, because let's face it, most agencies don't train their police officers nearly as good as they should be. It's the guys that do a lot of work on their own that are more successful. Yeah,
typically what I found is the guys that I knew that were high-level shooters, high-level grapplers, they're the guys who went out and are doing it on their time off.
That's right.
Because shooting quarterly is not going to do it. One of the things that took me many, many years to understand is, I think even back in the day when I was shooting 3-gun, I was shooting quite a bit up until I got all that tendonitis, but I didn't really look at it like some guys do. I've always heard, well, not always, but a few years ago I heard somebody say, you got to train it like it's any other athletic sport, right? Guys who play, heck, even guys who do city league baseball and football, that kind of stuff, they're practicing 3, 4, 5 days a week, for city league, for these sports. And I remember at a time when I thought, well, I'm training a lot, like every other week I'd go shoot 300 rounds and then I wouldn't do anything in between. And I thought, well, I'm shooting a lot. Yeah. And I couldn't figure out why I plateaued and couldn't get any better, And finally I had another professional shooter, JJ, say, hey, you got to train it like any athletic sport. You got to do it every single day. And if you're not doing something every single day, like dry firing and shooting in combination, Yang Lee, who's he's like a nationally ranked shooter, And he said that he was dry firing 2 to 3 hours a day, hitting the range 3+ days a week, shooting probably 1,000 rounds a week
That's right.
to get to be a GM or a Grandmaster.
Yeah, I just came back from a match this weekend, and
You're shooting the NRL, National Rifle League Hunter matches now, and you're doing pretty well, right?
yeah, I did. I placed third in this last one in the factory category, which I'm super happy.
And
with
where was that at?
Let's see, that one was in Price, Utah. They had 23 stages. I this year every match that I shot I RO'd, so I shot the entire match on Friday and then RO'd Saturday and Sunday. So
RO'd is, and you were a range officer.
range officer, yeah. So I ran everybody else through the course on Saturday, Sunday, and so I had to shoot the whole thing. It was 23 stages on Friday, which is it was really hot. It was like 90-something degrees, and it was just a scorcher. But I'm super proud of myself on that one. I mean,
Third place, that's
placing-
pretty good.
Yeah, it's really good, and like you said, you train and train, and like now I actually do dry fire more with that stuff than I do actual firing because it's crazy expensive, but two, the time I just. A wise man told me one time, those who want it bad enough will do what it takes to get it. Mm-hmm. And, I was very successful in 3-gun and PRS matches back in the day. And now I have a grandson. I want to spend more time with him. But I still have that desire. I want to win. And not only that, I want to be good at those skills and that craft so that I can train these young guys how to do it as well. So I still have to work at it a bit. I'm just not working as hard as I did back when I was shooting a lot of 3-gun.
Yeah, well, part of that, that you can dry fire, just like I think all shooting in general, you always hear people say you can practice everything dry fire in your house except for the recoil control.
Except for the recoil.
Right, so you can practice reloads, practice your draw, movement drills. And so I think with the NRL Hunter matches, I've done that. I think I've shot 4 or 5 of those matches. And, you're under time. This is supposed to simulate hunting, right? That all of a sudden you see an animal and you're trying to get your rangefinder out, you got to locate your target, right? That's part of it. The way it typically works is a range officer comes up and says, okay, it's your turn. You have 2 elk up there and you got to shoot them twice from each position or something like that. And you run 15 yards, whatever, and all of a sudden you pull your binoculars out and you're searching the mountain anywhere from like 100 yards all the way out to 1,000 yards. And you're searching right, up and down, right to left. As soon as you locate your target, now you got to range it, and then you get behind your rifle. You put your adjustments in your scope, and then you fire, and you typically have about a 4-minute time limit, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's
And
4 minutes. You gotta.
So you can dry fire those getting into position. So you got to get into those positions fast because sometimes it's prone, and then sometimes you have to get up off of prone and shoot off of a log or off of a rock or from a tripod. So you're up and down, and so dry firing those positions.
Practicing positions is huge, yeah. The things that our technology advancements have done for that game alone, tripods, the types of heads, the types of attachments from our rifles, from our binoculars and lasers to the tripod, they're a game changer completely.
Would you recommend a game like that for guys who are like law enforcement, military snipers?
There's nothing better for law enforcement snipers and military snipers. You have to, under stress, find your targets, get a distance on them, figure out your win solution, and engage them accurately. And you don't get to just hose at them. You only get maximum 2 shots at any target. So you must be accurate. So, yeah, I absolutely encourage law enforcement and military guys to do that game.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fun. But like you said, it is expensive, which is why I haven't done a whole lot of them, but I have done a few.
Yeah, but, law enforcement and military, you can take your law enforcement and military equipment and test it.
Yeah, because they have a lot of the old PR, or I guess not old, but PRS, right? There's the complaint I hear from everybody is, it's just a big game or it's an equipment race, right? Because of all the, some of these guys are shooting 25-pound, 30-pound rifles. They got, each rifle cost them like 10 grand and all that kind of stuff. But with the NRL Hunter Series, they have a factory division, right?
That's what I shoot. Yeah, I shoot factory. It's a factory rifle from Seekins Precision. It's got a nice low-pulled scope on it, detachable magazines, and an ARCA rail. So
And how much is a rifle like that? They're right around 1800, right?
Yeah, they're definitely under $2,000.
Yeah.
They're great rifles. They shoot very accurately. But, you know, when I hear somebody talk poorly about a shooting sport, it hurts my heart, because why are you there? You know, are you there to win the match? Well, then pay your dues. But if you're there to get better, I don't care what equipment you have. Whatever your issued equipment is good enough. Go learn to use your issued equipment well, and if you have your own, take that. That's fine. Go play with it and learn how to be better at your craft.
Yeah, I agree. And that goes for pistol as well, right?
That's right. Yeah, any of it.
I used to shoot USPSA for many, many years. I'd take my duty belt, my duty gun, and I'd go out and shoot either USPSA or I'm shooting Steel Challenge out of a level 2, level 3 holster.
That's right. Yeah, there's no way to get better at using your equipment than using your equipment.
Yeah, level 2, level 3 holster with a stock Glock.
Yeah,
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, and I did that
And
all the
that's,
time.
you know, that's one of the things about today. You know, we're out there on the range, and several of the guys were using some fun guns, I call them. You know, I've got several wonderful pistols, 1911s, 2011s. They're great guns. They're super expensive, custom built guns from when I was winning all kinds of prizes and stuff. And now I never even shoot them. They're just sitting in the safe, collecting dust, waiting for my son to take them. Because when the unit shows up with factory Glocks, I shoot a factory Glock. When
Yeah.
they show up with a 320, I shoot a 320. Go back and forth between those two all the time.
That's good. That's good. It shows it can be done with a stock gun. Not quite as fast, but
Not quite as
pretty
fast,
good.
yeah.
Does the job. All right, so we've kind of covered the shooting sports a little bit. Let's talk a little bit. You had a couple close calls when you were with the Border Patrol, right? You had some banditos, I guess, shooting at you down along the border.
Yeah,
Right? So tell us a little bit about those. You had a couple different ones.
Yeah, I got shot at quite a few times when I was a Border Patrol agent. But my very first shooting was pretty comical, if you ask me. Broad daylight. I have only been out in the field on my own for like 3 days. And I'm sitting in an old Bronco on high ground. People could see me for miles. And back in those days, they had the X operation, so you had to stay parked on a post and wait for the people to come to you so that you could do work, unless you had a good supervisor that would let you go get stuff, right? But I'm sitting in my rig, broad daylight, and I see these 6 guys coming for like 2 miles, and they finally get to the river. And I get out of my truck, and I'm just baffled. I'm like, can you guys seriously not see me up here? And I hold my hands up like, what are y'all doing? And they flash a badge at me. And I was like, oh, that's those federales. I got you. But, you know, they train us well, and you're like, you know you can't trust them. So they start going upriver, and so I just paralleled them and staying with them. And the river in that place was probably 25, 30 yards wide. And I get to this big old patch of carizo, which is like bamboo. And there's trails all over down there. And I come up on a trail, and it's got wet footprints, wet sign. And I turn directly to my right, and there's a guy squatted down. And the shots start ringing out and whizzing through all that bamboo from the other side of the river. And so it's funny because I had a really young law instructor at the academy, and I flash back to him saying this. He's like, you'll do the craziest stuff. You'll do this. You'll do that. You'll use people as a shield. You'll do this. And I run directly at this dude. I draw my gun, and I'm running right at him, and I grab him by the neck, and I hold him behind me, and I run over this levee, which is a big old dirt pile, and I get on the radio. I put him down, put his hands behind his back, and I get on the radio, and I call supervisor in the area and tell him what's going on. And they could still hear the shots going off over the radio, and so the whole nation starts swarming in on these guys, and they run out of ammo and they drive off, or they walk off down to their rigs and drive off. It was the craziest thing.
So what was the aftermath like?
Nothing. They just wanted that guy dead, and probably me dead. Zero paperwork, which anytime a shot's fired across any international border, it should be an act of war, but that's never going to get signed off on.
That's more of in the movies, right?
I've heard you in a couple of these podcasts, you talk about guys getting complacent when they're in law enforcement and military. And one of my shootings was just like that. I would always get aggravated because we didn't have enough long guns to issue to each person. And so you had to sign them out at the beginning of your shift and then take it, hope that it was zeroed.
And what kind of long gun were you
And
guys?
so we had M4s with iron sights and 12 gauge 870 shotguns.
You only had iron sights? You must be old.
Yeah, I know. I think you're older than me, but yeah. So I was one of few people that would check out a freaking long gun. And down there in South Texas like that, it's super humid, so the corrosion builds up really fast. It's salt water down there, and so they corrode really fast, and people don't like cleaning them, so they get lazy and complacent and just don't check out guns. They don't check out long guns, and a lot of people think, nothing will ever happen. But
I hear that
there's-
Border Patrol has more shootings as an agency as a whole compared to any other agency.
And there's shootings all the time down there. I mean, I can only imagine it's worse now than it was when I was down there. That was like 25 years ago that I was down there, but it's got to be worse, right? But so I'm going to school at the time, and I'm leaving the line early. I'm headed in to attend my class. Excuse me, and call comes over the radio. It's evening time. It's not dark yet, but it's evening time. Call comes over the radio that the Mexican military's got our boat patrol pinned down.
So when you say pinned down, for those who are not in this type of business, that typically means they're getting shot at and they don't want to stick their head up from where they're at, right?
That's right. They're getting shot at a lot. And so apparently they were either trying to shoot the Border Patrol agents or steal the boats or something. Who knows? But there was a lot of gunfire going on. And like with my first shooting, I could hear shots ringing in the background. So there was a lot of close fire. And then so I'm probably 5 or 10 miles away. So I whip my rig around and I freaking run code 4 up there, and I'm zipping. I'm flying to get there as quickly as I can because I know that I'm one of the few people with a long gun on that shift. And I come over this rise. I'm probably about 500 yards away from the river, and I could just see muzzle flashes for like 250, 300 yards down that river. There was a lot of people shooting, both sides. And I'm screaming down. I'm driving right for the middle of it. I don't know exactly where the boats are because the river's depressed there, but I'm screaming down through there, and a round comes right through the passenger side of my front windshield. And so I slam on the brakes and bail out and just start running as fast as I could, zigzagging down through there to the river. And I get right to the riverbank, and I find one of my buddies that's down there. And I see this guy on the opposite side, and he's shooting directly at our boats. I see flash, and I can see that dude. So I just raised my rifle up, took a breath, and sent one, and all the sparks stopped from that point on.
So you fired a shot when you
One
sent
shot.
one.
That was the only time I ever returned fire on duty. It was crazy.
So it was a one shot heard around the world.
For me, it was. I don't even think I heard the shot. I don't think I heard it at all. I don't recall much about it. I just raised my rifle up, and my dad taught me to shoot iron sights as a kid, and I shot iron sights, and that guy stopped.
So they kind of maybe feared there wasn't going to be any return fire from the American side, huh?
I don't think that guy shot anybody ever again.
So you were taking rounds from people on the Mexican side of the border,
That's right.
right? Your guys were pinned down. You roll up, jump out, and you fire a shot, and the shot stopped.
That's right.
So was there ever anything ever come of that aftermath?
It's the craziest thing because you would have to document something like that would mean that we were at war with Mexico, and that's just not going to happen.
So is that a common occurrence, you think, or had it been?
I think that's very common. It was when I was down there. There was never the only piece of paperwork that I ever received was we had a detailed supervisor there, and he wrote me what was called a conduct and efficiency report because I was still a young guy. I was a trainee, so he wrote me an on-the-spot conduct and efficiency report, and the only thing it said was, Mr. Mootes handles himself well under pressure. That's it.
So that was just something small that went in your file.
Yeah, it'd be a whole lot different if we were interior U.S., you know.
I would imagine maybe nowadays it's a little bit different, maybe.
You would think. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, well, at least for me, I know my law enforcement days from when I first started, right, 30-some years ago to, at least the first half versus the second half of my career, things were way different. And especially for, some of the young guys that get tired of hearing the old guys complain about stuff all back in my day, right? But it seemed like the first half of my career, like nothing changed. Everything was always the same day to day, right? As far as procedures, paperwork, laws, the way we ran our day-to-day operations, everything for like the first 15, 20 years. And then after that, we got into the technology age where, man, since policy changed constantly. Laws, there was always new case law. There was always change this, change that, a new software, new computer, new this, new that, and it just used to drive me crazy. So I'm assuming, right, things are probably the same way. Probably things have probably changed.
Yeah, I'm sure that in any law enforcement and military career, things are never going to be as good as they once were. I'm sure that there's people that get frustrated with it, but this is what I would say to that. Everything evolves one direction or another. You're either called to do it or you're not. Go do it for the right reasons. And if you're not doing it for the right reasons, go do something else.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's kind of tough the second, when you're on the downhill side for a lot of guys, right? I can remember how motivated I was the first half of my career compared to the last few years. It's pretty tough to stay motivated. And I remember me and some other guys about my age one day were kind of sitting around complaining more than we should, and we kind of looked at each other and we're like, holy heck. We're like, what? He's like, we just turned into those grumpy old dudes that we used to hate when we were younger.
That's right.
And that's hard to not do.
It is hard to not do that. So
guys who are on the second half or the downhill side of your careers, you got to be really careful with that because that can be a detriment to you and everybody else on your team. So you need to be careful.
It's easy to say, and believe me, I mean, life has lots of problems. This day and age, life is full of just all kinds of complications and problems. It's hard. It's hard to do it. But if you have a negative attitude, it's 1,000 times harder.
Yeah. Yeah, and that goes with hanging out with other guys that have that negative attitude.
That's right.
And you got to be careful because if you're that guy with that negative attitude, man, that's, like they say, it's contagious. And then it just gets bigger and bigger. The next guy has to hear it, and then they get that bad attitude, and then pretty soon you got a whole team of guys, and that's just not good. That's not good. So, anything else you want to say? We've been going for about 45 minutes, but I think we had a good talk about your background with the competitive shooting background. Talked about how it relates to law enforcement. Talked a little bit about working for the Department of Energy, or the DOE, like we'd like to call it. And I remember seeing that on an application once, going, DOE, does that mean? I go, does that mean Department of Energy? You're looking for people with Department of Energy? And they look at me like, what? And I'm like, no, that means depending on experience. I'm like, oh, okay, because I used to work for DOE. So it's just funny. Everybody's background, certain acronyms mean different things to everybody.
Acronyms they're awful.
But you talked a little bit about that, and then a couple of stories with getting shot at out on the border, some banditos. So anything else you want to add in there? Anything you maybe want to pass on to some other guys that might be listening to us here?
If you're the police officer or agent or military guy and you're new, just know that Uncle Sam, your bosses, they're not going to do everything for you. Not at all. It's a crazy world that we live in, so take the time to learn how to operate your equipment, learn your SOPs, be the best warrior that you can be, because when that time comes, you just never know when it comes. Sometimes it comes right away. Sometimes it's, the last day, your very last shift. But when that time comes, how good is good enough?
Yeah. And you just don't know.
You just don't know.
I like that you say when that day comes, because it used to be, right? I remember back in the day, they used to say if.
Yeah.
But it's not if anymore. It happens so often nowadays that it's when you get into a shooting or when you get in some type of critical incident. It could be a shooting, could be, a lot of other things. But the being physically fit, being good at some grappling, being good with a gun, all that stuff is really important. And sometimes I've had people say, you just put too much emphasis on that type of stuff because it doesn't happen very often. I was like, no, but when it does happen, if you're not good at it, that could cost you your life or it cost you somebody else's life. I've even had people in management say that, hey, you're too much into guns and too much into tactics. But as we've seen over the last, several years, one bad shooting can bankrupt a city. It can cause riots. It can cause lawsuits, all that kind of stuff. So we used to talk about, those high-risk incidents, low-frequency events.
That's right.
Low-frequency events.
The probability has definitely gone up in the last decade, but the low frequency, it's also going up. It's not the most common occurrence, especially for a local police officer. It's not the most common occurrence, but the more that our society goes in this wild direction, the more probability is that you're going to engage in somebody. They're going to shoot at you. They're going to try to chop your head off with a machete. That was one of my good ones. My son still played with that machete for years and years until he grew up and left. But people just do some what I would say crazy stuff. That they're getting more and more ballsy.
Yeah,
they're coming after you because they just keep getting away with more and more and more, and they just don't care anymore.
I heard an instructor once say, what would you do or what would you tell if you knew your son sometime in the near future, and not knowing the date, but maybe said, hey, in the next 5 years, someone's going to try to kill your son. What would you advise him to do? You'd probably be getting him to some grappling classes. You'd be getting him to the gym. You'd be getting him some instruction on firearms, and you'd be trying to get him to train every day, right?
It just so happens my son is a war fighter. My son is he's a young airman. He's trying to be a combat controller.
And I'm looking at a picture of a young man in kit. He's got a plate carrier, M4.
And so that young man, he's trying to be something good. He's trying to be something special, a good war fighter. And so he came, I only get to see him about once a year now. But he came home this last time, and all he asked was, Dad, can we go train at the facility that I work at? Same place you and I were at today. And it was such a proud dad moment.
Yeah.
And it goes right with what you said. I know he's going to get in a gunfight. Mm-hmm. It disturbs me, but he worked really hard. And over the years, I had him shooting 3-gun, and it was just a game then. But I knew this day would come, and he's training hard. Now he's in the military. They don't train the warfighters how to shoot that much yet, not where he's at, but he will. And he's already got one deployment. So he came out here. We did the full package that we do with every military and police unit that comes out here. And at the end of the deal, we had some what we call coliseums. They're just fabulous team movement courses of fire that have lots of engagements. And he's like, Dad, can we do that together, you and me? Because I was the range officer. And I was like, yeah, buddy, let's do that. And so
That's
I told
awesome.
the other kid that came with him, I was like, you keep us safe. You make sure that we don't point any guns at each other. If you see something unsafe, you yell ceasefire. And we went through it, and he understood the language. He was shooting those targets, hitting them first shot, second shot. The super close targets, he was putting multiple rounds into them really fast and accurately. Quiet, efficient movements. I couldn't have been prouder. It was so awesome.
That's awesome to see your kids doing that kind of stuff. My son was in law enforcement for about 4 years, and he ended up getting out. He got divorced and decided he wanted to do something else. But he was a top shooter in his academy class, and when he was younger, he was a 3-gunner too. When I was 3-gunning, and when he was, I believe, 14, 15, and 16 years old, I sent him to Fort Benning.
Awesome.
And
Yeah, for the youth program.
He was there for the youth program. He was 3-gunning, was some of the top professional instructors in the nation at the time.
Yeah, all the AMU guys are the best.
Yeah.
They're the best.
And he come out of there, and he still remembers that stuff. And we go out and shoot, and he doesn't practice as much as his dad, but for some reason he just it's just kind of stuck with him. And he's really hard for me to keep up with, man. He can shoot,
Oh, yeah.
And even though he's out of law enforcement, he carries concealed, so he's like, hey, I still got to keep up my skills so that I can protect myself and my family. And so, pretty proud of him when I see him.
Well, that brings up a really good point, Raul, because I'm sure a lot of your buddies that listen to this are also retired like us, and they still carry a gun to defend themselves or their family and friends. How good is good enough? You still have to train.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the things that's kind of funny, you're talking about some of the military guys don't get a lot of the training, like your son, whatever unit he's in. And a lot of the public sometimes, I during the school year, I work security, for a private school, and they hire me just to be armed security. I'm just there in case there's ever an active shooter, which hopefully there never is. But I still take it seriously, and I go out and train pretty regularly because of it. I spend a lot of money and ammunition just to stay proficient. But, I'm the only guy working there, and so sometimes I have to take a day off. And I've had other people come up to me, hey, if you ever need somebody to help you out so you can take a day off. I got an uncle who was a cop, or my brother-in-law was in the military, whatever, and I just kind of like shake my head and was like, okay, thank you, And I do have a handful of guys that help me. And one of the guys I have there with me, he's a multi-gun, or he's a USPSA, grandmaster. I have another guy who's a master class shooter at USPSA. These guys are former SWAT guys, and that type of background. But I think sometimes the general public thinks that every military guy has that background.
No.
And that's what they don't understand. Is so when people are saying, hey, I can get my uncle or my friend, whatever, he's retired. Some of these guys were not good shooters when they were working, and they don't shoot very much now that they're retired. But people think that just because they have that background, they're good with firearms, and that's just not the case, right?
That's right.
So if people really knew how little law enforcement military shot their guns, they would be surprised.
Yeah, the public doesn't understand. There's so many different jobs out there, and they all have their pros and cons. Being a police officer, being an agent, being a military operator, it requires a ton of different skills. It's not just shooting a gun. You have to know the tactics. You have to know your computer. You have to know how to do your radios. You have to know how to do the driving and everything else that comes along with it. You know, when I was an agent, we had all those classified programs that we had to keep up with, and it's never ending. They just keep giving you more and more tests and classes and stuff that you have to keep up with. And so what do you have to give up? Because there's only so many hours in a day, and that's the hard reality of being a police officer, soldier, agent, whatever. There's only so many hours in a day that your agency is going to invest in you, and some of it's on you. If you truly want to come home safe and healthy, if you truly want to defend your brothers in arms and sisters in arms, if you truly want to be that war fighter and walk away from it and make sure that your brothers and sisters walk away from it, you're going to have to train on your own.
Yeah. And then there's also the fact that there's so many different specialties within these organizations, right? I mean, you can be a police officer, carry a badge, and never have to chase somebody through a dark alley or, you know, be in a pursuit. That's just not part of the job.
Never pull a car over at all.
Yeah, and still have a badge and be a police officer or have arrest powers. So you got guys who are crime scene investigators. You got guys that are investigators that investigate property crimes, persons crimes, you know, domestic violence investigators, drug enforcement, all that kind of stuff, all these different specialties. Then you got your firearms guys and your SWAT guys. And so when I'm doing the security work or at this school, I look for guys that have that background, SWAT, firearms, because that, you know, if somebody needs to shoot in that kind of environment, that's going to have to be pretty precise. So we want guys who can shoot.
Yeah.
So I need shooters, not just somebody who bore a uniform.
And you don't just want somebody that's good with a pistol. I mean, who in the world in their right mind? You and I train today, and we shoot all kinds of targets out here, and it is hard to shoot a pistol accurately, especially if there's a whole bunch of youngins around, you know. I do the same job sometimes, and I've always thought it would be awful if I actually had to shoot somebody with a pistol. And I'm good. I mean, I'm not the best by any means, but I train a lot with a pistol. I would want a rifle.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know, so if there's anybody out there that freaking has any authority to change that, we want rifles.
Yeah.
And if you
It's gonna have to be a light one though if I'm gonna carry it.
I mean, if you could train with everything, right? You want to train with everything that would make you capable of doing that job, whatever the tool is.
Yeah. Yeah, if you do some kind of protection job, whether it's law enforcement, you know, security, you know, VIP stuff, just be good, right? Go out and train, do your firearms, your defensive tactics, and go above and beyond because it's important.
So to add just a smidge, on the competition thing of it, the one thing that it gives you is what are your limits? What are your limits? What are my limits? What is Jim's limits? You know, what are they with each system, with each, you know, carbine, long-range rifle, pistol? What are your limits? What are your capabilities with each of those tools? And so it's something that'll give you that experience to know, I better not do that one with my pistol. I better transition to something a lot better. I need to run and grab a rifle.
Yep. Yeah, if you can, especially if you're a police officer, man, grab your rifle. If you know there's shots fired or gunplay involved and you're responding to that call, grab a rifle.
Grab a rifle.
And I think pretty much everybody, at least in the valley that I worked, I think pretty much everybody has access to a rifle. I was lucky enough to work for an agency where every individual was issued a rifle. So that's a good thing. But yeah, man, just go out and, don't be the guy who wears a uniform and the public goes, wow, I'll bet that guy's good with that gun he's got on his hip, and not be good with it, right? Yeah. I heard a guy say once, man, come as advertised, right? You have that uniform and that gun on, you're advertising that you're good with a gun. Don't be false advertisement.
Yeah, don't be false advertisement. That's good.
All right, man, we're about an hour there. I think we'll call it good. I know I gotta get back cleaned up, and you got a little bit of a drive home. We got to be back here again training in the morning. So, all right, Tate.
All right, buddy. Well, thanks for the time, and you guys go do what you do and come home safe.
All right, talk to you later.